South Carolina undefeated once again for the second straight year, going up against NC State. And then for the nightcap, Caitlin Clark in Iowa against Paige Beckers and the Huskies. And here's what Dawn Staley, South Carolina's head coach, had to say about this team's season. Quote, "We've exceeded expectations internal and externally. To be undefeated, so unexpected, so very unexpected. There are plenty of times when I thought we should have won a national championship, but we didn't. This is somewhat of a repayment." And with that, we welcome in CBS Sports women's college basketball analyst Erica Ayala. And Erica, you hear that quote from Dawn Staley, or you see it. I'm curious, what do you make of their chances to complete the perfect season this time around after falling short last year?
Well, it's always a gamble to say confidently that someone's going to go undefeated, especially when we get to this point in the NCAA tournament. But what I like about this South Carolina team is that they true to themselves. Even when Coach Staley gives quotes like that in Albany, she was telling us a lot that she was uncomfortably comfortable with this team. Raven Johnson saying that she jokes around that the coaching staff is effectively basically the heads of daycare. They just have a lot of fun. They play light, but they know how to get serious and they know how to close out games. They have been unfazed by any lead that they've blown, anytime that they've been behind. You see that time and time again. That to me is the real testament. That's the real strength of their undefeated record. These weren't all blowouts. Some of these games, this young, sometimes immature team has had to really hunker down late in the game and grab a win. And so far, they've been perfect in doing that.
Right. They win in so many different ways. I think that's also what makes them so dangerous. And if they do complete the perfect season, they would just be the 10th team to do so. Now, we know, Erica, NC State doesn't really have the size to match South Carolina or the depth, but they do pose a lot of challenges. I mean, they have some dynamic guards. Isaiah James, you got Sanaya Rivers, who's flourishing with the Wolfpack. What do they need to do? What type of recipe do they need to cook up to spoil South Carolina's perfect season?
I actually think these two teams play a like-for-like game. You mentioned that the size, of course, is something that is noticeably different between South Carolina and NC State. But if you look at some of what they were able to do against Texas, they didn't win the boards battle. They were not winning the game in transition, and they also turned over the ball maybe a little bit more than they wanted to, but still won the game. And that is because they are getting great shooting. They shot 50% from range against Texas while keeping them under 20%. And so you're getting players like Rivers. You mentioned Isaiah James being able to shoot at an elite level clip. 7 of 9 was Isaiah James in that game against Texas to take down a number one. So that's what it's going to take if NC State wants to do it again and beat South Carolina, take down another number one. They're going to have to be great from the perimeter on top of being great in transition and using their speed and using their size to their advantage.
100%. They definitely have to limit those turnovers. You know the Gamecocks love to defend at a high level. That's what Dawn Staley prides herself on. Now, let's move to a game so many people are licking their chops for. The nightcap between Iowa and UConn. Caitlin Clark's coming off a ridiculous performance against LSU. 41 points, 12 dimes, had 9 threes in that game, if I remember correctly. And she's just been on a tear this tournament. 32 points per game, right? 32.3, 7 rebounds, 10 dimes, and shooting 46% from the field. She's also the 5th player in the last 25 seasons with 20 or more points per game, 6 or more rebounds per game, and 3 assists per game in tournament minimum of 10 games. So with all that being said, Erica, what should Gino Auriemma's UConn squad do? What should be their game plan to slow down Caitlin, who just seems to thrive more and more the bigger the moment?
Well, I'm not going to get the quote word for word, but if I recall, Gino Auriemma, maybe not literally, but figuratively, called every coach in the nation trying to figure out that question. And last I heard, he didn't quite have an answer. Basically, what we're hearing from coaches, we heard it from Kim Mulkey. Again, Gino, in his very joking way, said, I don't know that you actually stop Caitlin Clark. What UConn is going to look to do is to limit her touches, but also limit her ability to get her other teammates involved. The game against LSU, we saw Iowa come out fast. We heard Kim Mulkey say that's exactly what they did in the championship game. The difference was, I think the supporting cast for Iowa really came out and caused a few problems. We saw Hannah Stolke on Angel Reese early in that game, and then it was Addison O'Grady, 15 minutes, and she played beautifully on the defensive side for Iowa. We also have to look at what Kate Martin did. She was able to put up 21 points. We know that for UConn, it's going to be Paige Beckers and Aaliyah Edwards, but we also know they have a very short bench. They're working with a basically 7 players. So the depth of Iowa really has to shine. I didn't even get to Gabby Marshall, who was great from the perimeter in the game prior to against Colorado. That's what Iowa is going to look to do. So UConn has to stop the cast of characters, not Caitlin Clark.
Right, because Caitlin's going to get her point. She's going to get off. But if you can shut down, limit the production from her other players, her other teammates, then you have a much better shot of winning the game. So now it's time for the very tough question, Erica. Who do you have winning Friday's primetime matchup, the Hawkeyes or the Huskies?
I'm going to lean in favor of the Hawkeyes for this one. And, this is a UConn team that I think, including myself, has been underrated. I didn't know if UConn was going to be able to make a Final Four, and I think that is very admirable. And I just like how, again, the supporting cast is playing for Iowa right now. They were the difference in their last 2 games. The Colorado game, I think, was a little bit harder to discern, but again, Gabby had a great game in that game against Colorado. And so I really think it's going to be the supporting cast to Caitlin Clark, who also has been, you talked about how many assists she's had. She has really been in her bag as a point guard, not just shooting, but facilitating. She said the other day she can't fall in love with the 3 because she has to be able to penetrate to the hoop to open up the floor for the rest of her team. That's the mentality that Caitlin Clark has. And I just think if Iowa can do that, which they have been in their last handful of games, it's just going to be a little bit too much for UConn with their shorthanded bench.
Erica, thanks so much for the insight. Can't wait to see how it all shakes out on Friday. Should be a special night of hoops. Now, you look at schools in both the women and men's Final Four. You got NC State in the Final Four, UConn in the Final Four. With NC State, the women 3 seed, the men 11. And then for the women, they're the 3 seed. And for the men, they're the overall number 1 seed. And it's the first time 2 different schools have teams in both Final Fours in the same season. So that is something to be proud of if you are a Wolfpack or a Huskies fan.